This mower back when it was new was very expensive. In fact, if you had told someone that you paid this much for a mower, they were going to assume that it was a commercial mower. But as you can see, it's not a commercial one, it's a residential unit, but that's not the point of the conversation. The point is, if you pay this much for a mower, do you still have to take care of it, or can you treat it like a cheap mower from a chain store and still have it last a very long time? In today's video, we're going to be looking at this Honda lawnmower, and the problem is it has a lack of power and it wants to stall in tall grass. The bigger question is it the lawnmower's fault or the one using it? Now, the other possibility is that it could be a little bit of both, but with some diagnostic work, we should be able to figure out what's going on. Now, this is not a complete repair video. In fact, this is a revisit of an old repair from years ago. So if you want to see the actual repair video, click on the link at the top of the screen. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about expensive machines and the care they sometimes don't get. So expensive machines are perceived to be a higher quality when compared to cheaper ones, and for that very reason, most seem to treat them as though they'll need zero maintenance, which of course is not true. So here's the backstory on this machine, and as you're going to see, it will make a difference when it comes to the situation. Now, this lawnmower was bought by an elderly couple that I happen to know, and even though I never got the reason why they chose it, that's not the important part. The important part is what happened to it once they decided that they wanted someone else to do the lawn for them, and what they ended up choosing was family to get the job done, which if you know anything about that, that's not the best choice. So here's the part you'll be interested in. Since they were given the task of mowing the lawn with an $800 mower, do you think they bothered with any of the maintenance for the mower? The best answer to that question is, since they were not the ones who invested all that money into it, they have no reason to bother caring for it. Of course, the same goes for when you're using the company's tools versus when you're using your tools from your own toolbox. You're obviously going to treat your tools a whole lot better than the ones the company gives you to use, which, I hate to say, seems to be what happened here. So after a test start, you can see that a lot of smoke came out of the muffler on startup, and not only that, but it even did it when changing engine speeds. So what would cause this sort of behavior, and is it related to maintenance or something else? Now, it could be the air filter restricting too much fuel to the engine and causing it to run rich, so to test that out, we'll take it out and see if it runs any better. So as you can see, it did seem to make a bit of a difference. However, there was still some smoke, and the engine also stopped running, which was not supposed to happen. That means I would recommend replacing the air filter despite not looking that bad. So I think an inspection of the fuel system would be a great idea as well, and there's no better place to start than draining out the gasoline from the fuel tank and seeing what it looks like. Now, replacing the air filter would definitely be part of a good maintenance routine. However, there are other ways to deal with it. Now, giving it a good shakedown once a year, probably in spring, would be a good start. So what do I think about this gasoline so far? Well, what I see is not good. Gasoline is typically not cloudy like this, which means more than likely there's some moisture in the gasoline. Now that would make a lot of sense considering how this engine seems to be lacking some power and in our case, not wanting to stay running. Now the maintenance for an engine typically has to do with replacing certain parts, changing fluids, or checking and adjusting certain clearances. They don't typically have anything to do with the fuel, does it? The answer is that the maintenance for your engine also includes what you put into the engine, so the answer is yes, it does. And after going through the owner's manual, there's an entire section all about the fuel you put into the engine, which includes ethanol concentration to adding stabilizers, and finally, what you do when it comes to long-term storage of your mower. So yes, it may not be as blatant as changing the spark plug or the air filter, but paying attention to the fuel you put into the tank is part of a good maintenance routine. Now, more than likely, we shouldn't have to go through the carb after finding out the issues with the fuel, but since we've come this far, we might as well give it a good inspection. All we need to do is make sure that all the openings in the main jet and the emulsion tube are clear of any sort of blockages. Of course, getting rid of any leftover bad gasoline in the bowl will help out a lot. Now, if for some reason you'd rather just replace the carb, then that's up to you, and I don't have a problem with that choice. But remember, you get what you pay for, and if you choose to get a cheap carb, just be ready for the possibility that it might have some quality issues. Now, a discussion about parts quality is better left for a different video because it deserves a lot of time to explain my thoughts about the topic, and we'll keep our focus on maintenance, or in this case, the lack of it. So here's what a lot of people might be thinking about when it comes to doing maintenance on stuff like this. Most would assume that when it comes to quality, you're paying for it because this machine was so much more expensive than other mowers in its category. But if that was the case, then you would also assume that they wouldn't even bother to include an owner's manual in the box. But here's the clue that you're wrong, because the manuals do come in the box and they're hoping that you read them. That way you'll at least have an idea on how to take care of such an expensive machine long enough to at least pass the warranty period. Now, I know that reading the owner's manual is seen to be uncool, and it's just better to wing it when it comes to taking care of stuff. So let me change your way of looking at the owner's manual. Don't think of it as instructions, but instead as a tips and tricks or cheats book for your new toy or a game. Basically, someone's already made all the mistakes in the game, and what you're reading are the cheats, that way you don't make the same mistakes. Now, once you see it that way, I'm surprised more people wouldn't want to read it, and that way they don't lose that single life they get when they start this game. Now, I hope that makes more sense to you because it certainly seems to be a simple reason as to why you should even bother with it. Now, the reality is you just spent several $100s on a mower, and after reading all the cheat codes and tips, you shouldn't have a reason not to make it last at least 10 years, if not more. But the sad truth is, I just don't think most consumers even care anymore, but the root cause for them not caring is still a mystery to me. So if you have a good idea as to why, I'd certainly like to hear about it. Now, this situation is a bit different than a consumer who doesn't care. Instead, it's a family member whose job it is to use someone else's tools to get a job done, and I'm pretty sure you know how that's going to end up. So I could make some pretty terrible assumptions about the family member, but instead, I think it'd be best to put myself in their shoes, at least to be a little bit more realistic. So my job was described to me as having to use a family member's mower to mow their yard because they're not able to do it anymore. However, they don't really care about how it looks in the end, only that it gets cut and their HOA or the city doesn't get on their case about how tall the grass gets. Now the problem is, I don't own a lawn company, so it's not a paying job, at least not enough to call it a career move. And I want to get it done as fast as I can, that way I can get back to doing something that I really enjoy and not this. That means I won't be taking care of any of the equipment or doing any of the maintenance, and I'm only adding gasoline to it when it needs it. So how did I come up with these assumptions then? Simple. What I was describing was basically my childhood until I started doing sports, that is. I was either mowing our yard or someone else's using equipment that I certainly didn't pay for, so I do think my assumption was pretty spot on in this case. Now, don't get me wrong, I learned a lot about responsibility and hard work in all those years, but the one thing I didn't learn about was caring for my equipment. My only goal was to cover as much ground as possible and to add fuel to the tank when it was needed. That meant the care of the machines was on someone else's back and not mine to worry about. I was just the person using it, and I hate to admit it, but I'm pretty sure the person who was using this mower had the very same feelings about what they were doing. And in the end, the lack of maintenance and care finally caught up with them. Now, I can't blame them. They may not know how to do any of the maintenance for this mower, so for them, handing it off to someone like me is probably the best thing they could do for it. And as much as I do agree with this statement, I also happen to believe that it starts with them and shouldn't finish with me. And in this case, making sure that the gasoline was in good condition was their responsibility and not mine. I'm just here to deal with their mess. So how are you supposed to be responsible for the gasoline then? Simple. Make sure that you have a fuel container that's working like it should be. The gasoline cannot be exposed to the air, the container has to have a proper cap on it, and the fuel in it cannot be more than a couple of months old without being stabilized. So if that means you have to buy a new gas can to replace your old one, then so be it. And if for some reason you buy 5 gallons of gasoline each year, only to have about half of it left by Christmas, you might want to consider buying a 2-gallon container instead of a 5-gallon. That way, it'll force you to have to go to the gas station not just once a year, but at least twice a year, and it'll make sure that it's still somewhat usable before Christmas. And if you happen to have a gallon left over of gasoline that's half a year old, then put it into your car. And that's because since it's only a gallon and more than likely there's going to be a couple of gallons in your fuel tank in your car, it won't have any real effect on it. Now, as far as learning how to do the maintenance on your own stuff, well, I'd recommend doing whatever you're willing to do. And if you're not able to do it then just pass it on to someone else who will do it for you. Of course, it's not going to be free, but then again, that's the price you're going to have to pay. Now, for those of you who are going to argue that battery stuff has no maintenance, well, you're mostly right. Of course, there's no oil, spark plug, or air filter to change. However, they still recommend that you do some sort of care for the machine and the battery as well. Now, you may not want to call that typical maintenance, but what I see is stuff that you have to do to keep your battery machine working. And if you don't want to call it maintenance, then go right ahead and don't. Now, either way, the point is all lawn equipment, cheap or ultra expensive, requires that you do a bit of care to it to keep them working well. Whether that's the maintenance heavy gasoline machines or the minor things that you need to look out for on battery stuff, it still needs to be done. So please don't think just because it has a Honda sticker on it that it's going to last forever without any care, because it's not going to. Now, after having gone through the carb, I didn't see anything wrong with it, which I pretty much expected, and besides getting a new air filter later on, the main culprit was the bad gasoline in the tank, so it should start and run a whole lot better now. So as you just saw, it was running a whole lot better with a lot less smoke coming from the muffler, and it didn't stall when going to idle speed, which is what it did the last time. I can only hope that they take better care of this mower, but then again, I really don't expect much to change with them. So more than likely, I'll be seeing this mower year after year until something changes. So my question is, do you do your own maintenance on your stuff, or do you have someone else do it for you? Now, there's nothing wrong with having someone else do it, but then again, I'm pretty cheap, so of course I'm going to do it myself. Not that it's hard to do, but it does require a lot of time, which some people simply don't have. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.